welcome everyone to this Q&A for Maurice Hines, Bring Them Back, with filmmaker John Carluccio, who is joining us today from New York. So John, thank you so much for being here and letting Sound and Scene present your amazing documentary.
Well, thank you. You're reaching me here in Brooklyn, New York.
All right, so Brooklyn, and yes, I'm talking to you from Austin, Texas. So
okay,
yeah, but yeah, let's dive right in. I mean, I love this film so much, and again, I'm so appreciative that you know, we're showing it here at Sound and Scene. It makes a lot of sense. I guess the first question I have for you is, you know, what got you interested in doing a doc on Maurice Hines, and did you know him prior to doing this doc?
I actually didn't know much about him prior. I mean, I knew about Gregory Hines. I knew he had a brother. I saw the Cotton Club film, which came out in the '80s, and I saw that connection. And it was about 2 months, about 2 years before I met him that I saw some interview because he was promoting a one-man show he was doing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Brothers that didn't get along, but there seems like there's tension there, but it's weird. I was like, I got a sense that it must be difficult for him to describe his brotherly love, which that was the soft way that I would get into it with him. When I talked to him, I said, describe brotherly love. And that complexity was something that drew me to the story. My brother and I worked together, and we really don't work together anymore. But we're still friends. But that really drew me into it. And then I was introduced to him through a mutual friend, and we kind of hit it off. He weirdly didn't expect a lot from me at first, and I was surprised. He's like, "I like you. Let's start doing it," and then we started doing it. So, and then his story start as you see in the film. Right. You know, you go into making a documentary maybe with one idea, and the original idea was that it was going to be like he's returning to the Apollo Theater. You know, that was the first shoot we did. And then, but that didn't end up happening, and you follow wherever the story takes you. And if you pay attention, you get something interesting, and that's what the film ends up being.
So yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting that he was pretty, you know, pretty open to doing a doc right away without much, you know.
Well, I take that back a little because because in the film, it's kind of like there's this near and far quality to him.
Sure.
In that he's very like, he's a showman and he reaches out to the crowd, but he's also very private. So there was this kind of like this is what was odd, was like he was open to doing the film, but I feel like he's had so many false starts or so many projects that are like, yeah, what the hell, let's just do it. You know, you seem cool, you seem like you know what you're doing, let's do it. But at a certain time, he was just like, "Oh, we're doing this. Why are we doing this?" And like he would yell, "Cut!" and stuff like that. He just didn't want. And I said, like, "Look, I'm not doing sort of this biography EPK kind of like promo piece for you. I want to do a story." And you know, there were points early on too where I almost walked away from the project because he was just kind of not engaged in it, and I'm like, I'm more interested in doing this than he is. So, but it ended up happening, and you know, there's a little bit. I saw what's this film? I saw that Amazing Jonathan film.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, I identify with that director. A little bit of that happening because he didn't want to see any clips. I mean, I can understand, like, I can kind of understand that, but he put me in. He put his story in my hands. And yet he wasn't interested in seeing how I was trying to tell it. I mean, I had a sizzle reel and a trailer and you know, like little sample clips and stuff. He just didn't want to see it. So sometimes when he would just say, "I don't want to really do this anymore," it was okay for him because he had no idea what was being done. Like it was just like, you know. So it was a give and take, and but it was that important. The story was really good. I was really in love with a lot of the archival material. The music is really fun. Like the music is a big part of the film in that, like, there are lyrics. I'll listen to a Hines and Dad song that's Maurice, Gregory, and his father, and it's prophetic. It's like you he's telling you how he feels today in the song that he recorded 40, 50 years ago, whatever, 60 years ago. And is that possible? No, 50 years ago, right? So it was really wild how like the music kind of informed the emotion, and then the archives too. Like there's these cool like clips from Cotton Club and Sesame Street and things like that that were like art imitates life. And so when I met him, saw these archives, listened to the music, I was like, wow, the archives and the music really do a lot to illustrate what is not there, what I can't illustrate today. Because like when you tell a film, when you do a story, documentary, there's a lot of people, a lot of great stories, but how are you going to show it, right? And so these archives really helped, like, abstractly explain what was going on between Maurice and Gregory. So I fell in love with that stuff.
Right. And, I mean, I'll be honest, I knew very little of Maurice Hines, obviously.
Right.
And I mean, yeah, it seemed like Gregory got most of the, I don't want to say credit, but, he was more well known.
Yeah, he was more famous. He was like, there's like the superstar.
Yep.
But, there's always the other brother.
Yeah, or the other sibling.
I mean, it's not Beyonce and Solange, but there are, because they didn't work together. But there are duo acts where they break up, but they're still family. So it's like, ooh, what happened? And there's always going to be one person that's just more charismatic, or I wouldn't say more appealing to the time or the audience, And Maurice being such a vocal kind of agitator at times was enough to separate him, and Gregory being so smooth and cool was enough to kind of elevate him. So, and I think Gregory wanting to be a Hollywood guy, and Maurice being a Broadway guy, the two of them were very different, and they weren't really. Maurice would say they weren't in competition, and I agree they weren't, but I do think that there was tension. Like that's like you can maybe say we're in two different teams, two different like Broadway and cinema, but I still think there's obviously some tension, and that's revealed in the film.
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe it's a professional jealousy, in a sense.
Right.
But yeah, and it also, I mean, this is sort of a stretch, but it makes me think of something like Liam and Noel Gallagher of Oasis or something.
Right. I mean, there is this, whether it's a creative partnership that's really close or a family partnership that works together, there is a shorthand and maybe even an ability to be like, you feel like that person so well that you can tell them off. And that Gallagher's, that was interesting in that they had like that thing, the live show or something, they kind of heckled the other guy or something.
Yeah.
And I saw that, I was like, oh dude, I know that. Like I know that I don't live in the public life. So that was the other element to it too. It's like I can only imagine the tension between brothers in general, or that maybe work together and no longer work together. So let's say it was two plumbers that had a couple. I can understand like they might be like, oh, how come you're more successful than the other or something? But being in public and being interviewed and having to pretend and not wanting to affect the other person's career either was even added an extra layer. So I felt like that kind of is a universal story, but very specific to these guys. But I felt like you don't even have to like tap dance or Broadway or whatever to really understand like the family dynamics and the creative partnership dynamics, especially when they're only 2 years apart. Like that's a big thing too.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, again, you made this film on Maurice Hines, but I wondered, as you were pitching it to him, as you wanted it to be more about him and his story, and not so much about Gregory or the sibling rivalry per se, but was there anything that was sort of off the table when you
no, it was, I think he didn't want to talk about what happened between
the
two, but the thing was, I had original edits, I had more Gregory in it, and Maurice, since Gregory has passed away, he has this you know, I said brotherly love, but this maybe over like hyper romantic feeling about his brother. Like in that he's like, my brother was the greatest tap dancer of a generation. He's beautiful to watch, and I I think, you know, he honors him, right? Even, you know, and so he constantly was telling me this. But he was also telling, like, you know, when he did press, so he did like Tavis Smiley and different like news shows, I would see the same answers. And so I'd have to press him a little and be like, yeah, but you guys didn't always get along, right? You know what I mean? And it took a while to kind of break through to say, hey, you know, it's okay. You can be both, right? You could say he's the greatest. I love him, but we weren't. Oh, I don't always like him, you know. And that was kind of like off limits, but eventually kind of like politely persisted and got it in there in a way where he would talk about it because he felt safe that I would not exploit it. I wasn't going to make a, you know, a soap opera kind of film, but I wanted to show that it's a real nuanced gray area. So at first it was kind of like he wanted, to me, if I just listened to him, it would have been a film about Gregory Hines. Like, because he barely, like, he's humble. He's you know, he's sassy, and he'll say, I'm cute, you know, and all that stuff. So he's real fun, and he's not shy about, you know, being proud of himself. But he always takes second to Gregory, and the people around him, and you see in the film, are like, no, you're great too. And in fact, the story is a lot about self-love. You know, he knows he lived in the shadow of his more famous brother, and he has to find, he knows he's a star too. And you could tell him it, and eventually he'll be like, yeah, of course I know I'm great. But there's a point where he carries himself because his brother was such a big deal. And so that's kind of, yeah, but as far as anything off limits, not really. I remember when I first met him too, he said he was gay, or I asked him, he said it. And then I said, I want to make sure that's in the film. And he goes, no problem. You know what I mean? Things like that. He wasn't, even though his one-man show, when he did his one-man show, that's not part of that Broadway performance. And I asked him why. He goes, well, the Broadway world doesn't need to know that right now. And I was like, really? So he does have, like, there's a generational distance that people of his generation also, you know, there's, you know, elements of talking about race and stuff like that that we made sure we included in the film too. So there wasn't, I wouldn't say there was much off limits, but there were points where he would just be off limits. Like he was just like, I don't want to shoot today. And I'm like, I'm on the train heading your way. Or I'm like, I'm in a car coming your way. And, oh, okay. But then we would shoot and I'd get the best interview. So it was kind of like this weird give and take. You had to sort of realize, like, he says no first to put you on your heels. And then you got to say, well, could you, and then, you know, once he's open, because he knows there's no in between. He's not really filtered that much. So that idea that he puts up like a big guard, as soon as that guard's down, he's much more available emotionally. So.
Sure, and I bet at some point, or, you know, even through filming, and, you know, like you said, he didn't really want to see the footage or things that you were filming, but it must have been cathartic in a way for him to sort of, you know, share these stories and share the family dynamic and the history. But also, I wonder, I mean, it's been almost a year since the film premiered at Doc NYC, which you can sort of see in the background there. Other shoulder, but yeah, right there. But I imagine Maurice has seen the film, and I wonder what his thoughts are on it as well.
Well, it's interesting. I think he's seen it twice now. We saw it at Doc NYC, and he said he wasn't going to show up for the premiere. we had an elaborate scheme to bring him there. It was behind the scenes, like, because if you see in the film, there's a part toward the ending where he's really he's isolating himself, and that still was kind of generated that still was going on in his life in a way, even though he was much more relaxed because there was sort of less pressures in his life. But yeah, he's like, I don't want to see it. I'm like, can you just show up for the Q&A, you know? And then we brought him there, and then we cornered him. We made sure that the guy who was with him, Mel and Charles, sat right next to him, and he couldn't leave. and he laughed throughout the whole film. He did the Q&A afterwards, and he was really grateful. He said, I think the most important thing is his family, because there's, even though there isn't that much of his mother and his father, there's just bits. But I think the importance of his childhood and that Hines, the Hines Brothers stuff, I think that stuff, it kind of like people don't realize, like that was a big chunk of time, and those are the formative years of both Gregory and Maurice. And so I think he liked the fact that that was, I think, more clearly stated. And then he saw it a second time, but he has some different memory issues. So sometimes I would ask him things, and he doesn't remember parts of the film. So it's interesting. Like I think every time he sees it, in a weird way, he sees new stuff. That I was worried that he might not like certain things, but he's been really cool about it. He sees the film now as like he's 70. He'll be 77 in December. Excuse me. But it's like 3 acts, like, and the first act was as kids, then the second act was Broadway and a little bit of LA stuff. And then the third act was tapping through life and these kind of the stuff he did at the Arena Theater, which was like in his 60s and 70s. And now when I ask him to do something, if we get out if we do another public appearance kind of thing, I describe it as like, it's just taking a bow. That's all. You don't need to, it's not your final act. This is your, what do you call, your curtain call. This is your curtain call. So it's his curtain call. He likes having something that he can talk about, because I think that's the other thing. Weirdly enough, I think this is what he likes most about it. He has something to say he's doing. Like for all his life, it's like, what's your next gig? When you're a performer, you're like, hey, or even anyone, when you have a job or something, where are you working? And he would, during the filming, he would talk about these projects that he had. He was like, oh, I'm trying to do this show, Feet Do Your Stuff. I'm trying to do this project. I'm trying to do this project. And then I would say, I can help you with that. And I could tell that he really just he didn't really want to do the project. Maybe he wanted to do those projects, but he more needed to have to say, I'm doing something. So the film now acts as, I got this documentary out that's about me. So he has something like he can sort of like tweet about, even though he doesn't tweet, So that's his thing.
And I wonder. I mean, I don't know. I mean, now that the film has played a little bit at a couple festivals since the premiere last year, but given how November looks in 2019 versus today in 2020, obviously the Broadway and the film world have basically shut down due to the pandemic. And I wonder, it was Maurice, is he still working? Is he still advising? Is he still doing any shows? Obviously Broadway is shut down, but I mean, how is he staying active?
He's kind of really retired in a lot of ways. He's not really, he will, he does this one-man show called Tapping Through Life, which is, he's done it on a big stage, but he's also done it like as a small a small variation with like a 3-piece band, and him doing songs and telling stories in between it. But he does that, here and there. And right now that kind of world is closed. I think in a weird way, he's pretty mellow about, like, I feel like I joked about it with him. Like I said, he was getting a little stressed out about life in general. And then the whole world kind of collapsed with COVID and stuff.
Yeah.
And I talked to him, and he was so much more relaxed. It was almost as if chaos caught up with him in a way. Or like, now you get why I'm freaked out a little. Like, it was kind of like this unwritten thing that was going on, that I feel like he's kind of just weighing out the storm here, and once in a while get a gig here and there. But it's he's finally kind of slowed down, and I mean, everyone's been forced to slow down.
Right.
So that's where he's at.
Well, and I mean, like you said, he's sort of semi-retired, but
70 years. I mean, it's like a long, long time. The crazy part about it is when he gets on stage and he taps, it's like, I talked about he has some memory issues. His dance-wise, it's all there. His muscle memory is all there. And I think because it's like the earliest things he learned too, that he can immediately turn it on. I mean, he really does have a youthful like physicality. Like he's still very young. I mean, his doctor said he had the body of a 14-year-old or something like that. But you know, but he's still, but you know, he's lived a full life. A lot of people are no longer in the picture, and he is very, you know, he romanticizes the past a lot. So, and we keep trying to, you know, we try to keep him going and introducing him to young audiences through this film. So, so yeah, but he's wonderful to talk to. He's got a good spirit. Even though, but like I said, it's night and day. Sometimes it's like a great spirit, and sometimes he's like, Carlucci, I don't know. Like, you know, he talk. So, you know, and at that age, you can be that way. It's like,
Right.
Yeah. So.
No, I mean, look, the film is tremendous, and it does really give you a great, you know, character study of someone that you didn't really know too much about outside of, you know, if you don't follow Broadway, if you don't follow tap and jazz and dance. And, you know, these are sort of like the type of films that we at Sound and Scene really look forward to seeing and hearing more about. And I wonder, you know, now that the film's completed and we're showing it and it's getting out there, but was there anything before you started filming that sort of surprised you in your approach in making this, you know, such a, you know, intimate story as well?
Yeah, I would say normally a lot of my films in the past have been about process, and so I kind of do a bit of a fly on the wall kind of thing where someone will be making something, whether it's someone making beats or painting or something, and they'll do it, and then while they're doing it, I get comfortable in their space, and then I ask them questions and all that. We didn't have that kind of opportunity for him to be making something, and it was so much. So that was different for me. I had to adjust, and the other thing I really had to adjust to was I kept finding him telling me the same stories over and over, and I was looking at the archives of stuff, and he would tell a same story from 1986 about the Cotton Club. He would tell me in 2017 or whatever it was, and I was just like, I got to break him out of this. And normally with interviews, you know, it's a part of you has to be, you know, a good listener and just listen. But if you just let people talk like him, you won't get anything new. So I had to interject and cut him off at times in a way that you would think would be a little rude for someone, especially an elder. Like, you're supposed to be very respectful, and I was. But it took a little while for me to be like, cut through the crap, kind of, in a way, like not literally saying that, but saying like, really, come on, you know. And it was like, because his interviews were so, it's like his dance steps. He's just like, he knows he just had routine answers. And I didn't realize this actually until we started doing the press tour kind of Q&A stuff, because when people would interview him at the Q&A and they would try to ask him questions, he would just go to his standard answers. And I realized, like, I would inform people like yourself, if you were interviewing them, like, don't be afraid to challenge him a little. I mean, do it politely, but don't be afraid, because otherwise you're just going to get him talking about his brother Gregory and the great time they had together. And he's told that same story 100 times. And there's more to that than him. And also, we end up always having to say, but you're great too, Maurice. I mean, every time we have to remind him he's great. And so, that's the story. But the one thing I also would like to say, though, is that I did a lot of stuff with DJs and DJ culture, and seeing the archives, I was really I was inspired by a lot of like hip hop production, and the way a lot of times with like a sample, the sample might be used not just to like an archive in a lot of documentaries is used for illustration. Like these kids were 13 years old, and there's a picture of the kids at 13, right? And for this, I tried to do that. You know, I did that definitely to keep the story going, but sometimes it would be archived that would also express emotion. Like it might make you laugh or might reinforce the feeling. The feeling of the archive was almost more important than the actual, whether it made sense. It had to make sense, but whether it was a clearly simple illustration. And I find that it's kind of a, you know, whether it's a Public Enemy might sample something that's totally not right, that might not feel like it fits, but emotionally it fits. So my attitude about using archives is really, I really tie it back into that world a lot. And I think, you know, talking about it on Sound Unseen is right place to talk, right place to figure it out. Yeah.
Well, and I gotta say too, even the people that you got as interviewees to discuss Maurice's career, someone like Debbie Allen, just the knowledge and the stories that she was able to share is pretty incredible.
Well, yeah, there was a little bit of, there was a couple celebrities in there, but what I found though was I lean away. I wanted more intimate personal stories, you know, because I tune out when it's like the same few, you know, big celebrities are doing they're talking about this artist, and these are the people that are in the film are people that call Maurice once a month, or you know, at least, and are with him. And I wanted to make sure to maintain that intimate feel, as opposed to someone that hasn't talked, except for one person, that Mercedes, they worked a lot together, Mercedes Ellington. So she was good, and she was actually really good in giving you a contrarian point of view too, to say, he's not as sweet as you think, you know, and it gives you, no, and when that stuff happens, it allows the viewer to kind of say, okay, there is nuance here. This is not, like, not everyone gets along, but you almost, when you hear that, you might even defend Maurice more. Like, it's like, so including someone maybe criticizing your main character gives your film a little bit more weight than it all being, he's great, you know? So I made sure that, and I also was just less, I mean, there are a couple big celebrities that we almost got toward the end there, but in my mind, it wasn't as important as getting stories that came from a genuine, you know, feeling of like, I love Maurice, and I just spoke to him on the phone yesterday. That kind of feeling. Yeah. So that's the feeling of all the people in the film. So.
Okay. Well, and no, I would love to keep going, but we got to wrap this up here.
Before we do.
Well, I got one question though. Still.
Okay. I got a surprise for you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Last question is, you know, now that people have watched the film, and you know, hopefully Sound and Scene can help get it more into the orbit and have other people check it out. But you know, as a documentarian filmmaker, I mean, what do you hope that people get from watching the film?
A greater sense of, like, well, I would say Black excellence, you know, seeing someone like Maurice, who has been doing this for a long time, you know, and is a survivor, like understanding sort of the survivor experience in entertainment and in life, with, you know, with family and loss, but then also a sense of joy, because Maurice, like, is a fun person to be with, and sometimes you need to, you know, I don't know, I like seasoned professionals, people who have these rich stories, but he also just has this way to grab people, and I just hope that he grabs people in a way which where people say, oh, I didn't know about this guy. He seems like he lived a complicated life, but I love him, you know, and I love him, you know what I mean? So that's the, I guess that's the, I should really tighten that up.
I really did fine. You did fine.
Okay, cool. I gotta be.
And I should say real quick before we wrap too, and for your surprise is, for people watching this, they can watch you on our Sound and Scene filmmaker panel as well, which will be live Saturday, November 14th at 1 p.m. Central. So you will be part of the panel, and you'll talk more about the film as well there, if people want to know more about the story and the process, and discuss it with other filmmakers. So, but what is the surprise you have for us?
Okay, so I have a history with Sound Unseen.
You do?
I mentioned this in the email. And so I think I might have been at the first one, and then either 1 or 2 years late. What year was the first one? Do you have any idea?
1999.
Okay, I think it was at the first one. So, or maybe I wasn't. Maybe it was the second one. And then 2 years later, I was with, and that was with a film called Battle South. It was a hip hop DJ.
Yes. Yes.
And then 2 years later, I was with this thing called Hop Fu.
Yep.
At least I know 2002, I know I was there with Hop Fu, which is a hip hop kung fu live thing where we showed a kung fu film and I had DJs performing with it. And I curated the thing, but with my friend Barry Cole, and the DJs were XL and IXL and XS. But I told you I have the shirt.
Right. Oh, wow.
Okay, I found the shirt. Okay, but see, let's see if I can do it here. I think you can kind of see.
Yeah.
It. Here it is. Right. So this way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I can't figure out what, and then even, how come I get there? The focus.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's good right there, yeah.
There it is.
Wow.
Yeah, and then this I was digging. I think I might. This is the. Can I get it?
Yeah, it looks a little fuzzy right there. There, that's good.
There you go. Yeah, that's the list of films. It said.
Wow.
Yeah, so I found the shirt.
You're like the second person.
Original one I'm still looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've only seen that shirt from one other person, so now there's two people I know that have that shirt.
Yeah, it was
like
amazing. A spaceship kind of thing, and I forget the guy, sweet guy who ran the festival.
Nate Johnson, maybe.
Nate was great. Nate was great. Yeah, and I love Minnesota. I love Minneapolis. So yeah, it's too bad, but you know, great festival. It's a great festival.
Well, thank you for being part of the 21st annual Sound Unseen and our first virtual festival. Director John Carluccio.
Got it.
Maurice Hines, bring them back. Thank you so much, and good luck with the film, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Appreciate it.